You're watching Twin Tiers Sunday with Joe Malillo.
All right, thanks for joining us, everybody, here on Twin Tiers Sunday. Joining me right now is Corning City Manager Mark Ryckman and also Elmira City Manager John Burin. We're here to talk a little bit about the two cities and it's budget season. You guys are kind of coming together, the state of the city a couple weeks ago, Mark. You kind of laid out some plans that you'd like the city to accomplish. And John, I'm sure Elmira is going through a lot of the same things. Corning, I mean, we're in the southern tier of New York, and it seems that you guys face some of the same challenges, but you fight them differently. I'd like to go over something that I caught my eye a little bit when I listened to you, Mark, was the housing situation in Corning. It seems that the number that keeps coming out is something around 60% of your housing was built before 1961 or something, 70%. Is that correct?
Yeah, 70% of our housing was built before the 1960s. And what we're seeing is that people's tastes in housing are changing. People want modern amenities. They want larger lots. We tend to have smaller lots in the city. And we've been successful on Market Street in converting a number of the upper floors of the commercial buildings to apartments. Some of them high-end apartments, but many of them middle-range apartments. And there's actually a demand for those. We have 82 of them on the street. We've got 13 more that are going to come online within the next year. So it's been a successful program. Somehow we need to begin replicating that elsewhere in the city to address our aging housing stock.
It's interesting because you say that, before 1960, that's before the split of 72 even hit.
Correct.
So you're dealing with a lot of old houses that maybe are just falling apart. I know I live in the city, and my house is falling apart somewhat. So I guess how do you translate that? Is that just bringing someone in and maybe making it a project for them to look at?
Well, what I've proposed to the council is that we need a housing strategy. We're putting together an infrastructure strategy. I've proposed to them an economic development strategy and then a housing strategy. So what the housing strategy would consist of is hiring a consultant to do an inventory of our current housing stock, give us a rundown on current conditions, and then helping us formulate a strategy that would use code enforcement and other types of incentives to entice people to invest in these properties.
Now, I'm sure John, Elmira has probably some of the same issues. Would you agree with increasing your housing stock in order to maybe bring in more different residents?
Well, I don't know about increasing the housing stock because we really don't have much area to do that. But changing the quality of the housing stock that we have, for sure. We have, our average age of our house is actually, I think, a little bit older than what's in Corning. It's probably closer to 1950, the majority, or older than that, the majority of the housing. But a lot of our housing has been converted to multifamily and absentee ownership. There's a lot of absentee ownership, and that creates a whole different gamut of problems. Code enforcement, police, garbage, so on and so forth. So in our city, in the city of Elmira, we've had to do things like property registration ordinance to force landlords to give us their names, contact information, things of that nature. A vacant property ordinance was just passed. It's those types of measures that we're taking to try to have the property owners become more responsible.
The vacant building ordinance now, it's a registry. Can you
Correct.
explain what that means to maybe people who don't know?
You'll receive a notice in the mail that you, according to our records, you own this property, it's vacant. You need to register that property with us. When they register the property, part of the process is what's your plan for the property. If it's to remain vacant, you have to do certain things as far as the boarding of the windows and so on, keep it so that it's not open to intrusion. And for every year that it does remain vacant, there's actually a fee that goes along with that. We're trying to encourage people to do something with the properties, fix them up and get them occupied.
Now, Mark, would you say that in Corning, vacant buildings are an issue as well, or?
We do have some problems with some vacancies. There's not a lot of vacant houses, but there are some. We do deal with the issue with absentee landlords. Some of the rental properties need to be upgraded. like John mentioned, some of these are older houses that have been carved up into multifamilies, and as John said, that brings additional problems in terms of code enforcement, garbage, property maintenance, and also parking issues because the density is high. So, you know, one of the strategies may be to take a look at how do we entice people to convert some of these multifamilies back into single families or duplexes to try to drive a little bit of that density down.
Now, the density, although it may, you know, change from resident to resident, but is there a way that you both can attack? Are there plans that maybe Elmira sees in the future that can attack both the issues of you know, the housing, the vacancy in the housing, but also, I don't know, like quality maybe? Quality going up, but bringing up the quality of the homes?
It's tough. It's very difficult to get people to invest. One of the issues you have is the market value of the property after the investment is made. And one of the issues that we have in the city of Elmira is that oftentimes if someone makes pick a number, $50,000 investment, they've only really increased the value of the property by, say, 30. And there's some gap financing that needs to be in place to make them want to make the investment. It's difficult to find the gap financing.
And what about you, Mark and Corning? I mean,
We deal with those same types of things on Market Street. We've gotten creative with some of the grant funding and some of the tax incentives to fill that gap, and that's really the trick. You've got to fill the gap in order to make this worth somebody's while to invest in the property. You know, they're not going to do it out of just a sense of altruism. There has to be a adequate return on investment for what they're putting into the property.
I mean, this may be a dumb question, but is there a way for both of you to work together? I mean, two of the larger cities in the area?
Well, I think there's lessons learned, and I think that's one of the things, what I'm proposing is that we take a comprehensive look at our housing stock and craft a strategy for the city, and it would mean going out to neighboring communities and looking at best practices.
Right. And his housing study that he's doing, I'll borrow. That's how we save money.
I was going to say, you got to make sure.
He already took one of my code enforcement officers a couple months ago. So.
Yeah.
Well, we know you cut that down in the city, you know, less code enforcement too, and working
Well,
together seems to be
A different form of code enforcement.
True.
Yeah. Actually, we have more bodies on the street, but it's civilian versus fire department.
Right. Well, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Twin Tiers Sunday with Mark Ryckman and John Burin.
Twin Tiers Sunday will return in a moment.
All right, welcome back for here on Twin Tiers Sunday with John Burin and Mark Ryckman, both city managers, two of the larger cities in the area. Projects are huge. We're going to move on to a topic of urban projects or just projects in general for your city. Mark, I know that the transportation center is a big project going on. It looks really good, I must say, every day driving by.
Yeah, we've got a number of projects going on. The transportation center is about $7.6 million project. It's actually taking up a whole block in the middle of our downtown. A lot of blighted properties we cleared. Transportation center should be online in July or August sometime this summer. And it'll serve the local municipal bus system, the intercity buses, and tour buses. That's one of the larger projects going on. We're also renovating the Centerway Bridge. That's a $5.7 million project that should be completed sometime this construction season. And we're also renovating City Hall. This has been a significant project. It's about $850,000. We're renovating City Hall to make modernize the court facilities and some of the office facilities that we have. And so if you come into City Hall, presently things are kind of turned upside down. There's a lot of activity, and but this project should be substantially complete in early April.
Something that I've wondered about the transportation center, are there going to be new bus routes put in that you know of, or The businesses that go in there, they're going to be
Yeah,
new?
there's no plan for new bus routes. Those are things that'll, get looked at over time, but really this is consolidating a number of locations. Our bus stops are really fragmented. We've got buses stopping at different corners. Some have shelters, some don't. This is going to provide a centralized location. We are working with the Gaffer District to find a vendor to go inside the building. We have enough room for one vendor in the building. We think it would make an excellent location for a small business to take advantage of the traffic flow through the center, and so we're hoping to be able to attract somebody in the next couple of months.
John, and you've made news with developer Michael Elzafan.
We did.
And we're making more news. We're, unfortunately, from what my understanding in our conversations is that, the $5 million, 5.5 from the Regional Economic Council will have to wait because of outside influences. But other projects for Elmira.
Yeah. Well, first I'll address Michael Elzafan. Michael's project's a wonderful project. It's a game changer, certainly, for downtown Elmira. Unfortunately, Michael was being investigated by the Securities Commission in Kansas. There has been no result of that investigation so far. I believe in Michael. I do believe that there will be no charges, but only time will tell. Assuming I'm correct, Michael does want to move forward with the project. There'll be another application for the Regional Council this year, and hopefully it'll get the same response as last year, which was a priority project, and they would have allocated $5.2 million.
So,
had they done that, we would have a project today up and running. Well, in beginning stages. Rosenbaum's project, we refer to as Rosenbaum's project, West Water Street, 3 buildings. That's been on the drawing board since 2007. It goes to show how difficult it is for urban development to happen in a city like ours. But we should finalize that deal within the next 60 to 90 days. It's 28 apartments, 28 units downtown, which is a great thing. First floor commercial space. We're renovating Riverfront Park across the street from there. We've renovated the parking garage. We're changing the look of Clemens Square behind Rosenbaum's Promenade, Clemens Center. That should tie that all together. Wonderful project. East Church Street, complete rebuild of East Church Street from Madison to Clemens. That will change the face of that area. And we've also made an application or will be making an application to the Regional Council to change the Lake Street Bridge to a pedestrian bridge. If we're successful, that's the route we will go. We believe it would tie in nicely with the Rosenbaum's project. If we're not successful, then that bridge will be raised.
I find it interesting because the Rosenbaum's building is very, it's a very historic building for the area.
Correct.
And to bring that back, it's almost like you're bringing the heart of Elmira back. And then obviously the apartments to go along with it. There is a demand for higher end apartments in downtown Elmira. And if you bring those people in, the idea, correct me if I'm wrong, is people come in, they walk around, they spend more money downtown.
Right. And to what Mark said, there is and I'm not going to compare Market Street to Water Street. Okay, it's night and day. Okay? But there is a demand for nice urban apartments. There's no doubt about it. You can have an apartment in a suburban area. It will not compete with that urban apartment. It just they're two different types of people. And I think Corning proved that there's a demand for people who want to live in an urban environment if the services are there. And that's what this is an attempt to do.
And in Corning, the project, the Centerway Bridge project, all of it seems to be, you're always coming out with something new or something to help. But you called it, I'm blanking.
They're community development projects,
community
not
development.
really economic development projects. And so over time, what I'm proposing to the city is we need to begin shifting towards some more economic development projects, one of which will be the redevelopment of the hospital. We're in the planning stages of that with Corning Hospital Board now. We need to begin moving in that direction as well.
And I guess in Elmira, is other projects that maybe we don't know about that you can divulge today on?
So if you want to kill a deal, talk about it publicly.
Yeah. So this is why I brought you on.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Well, continuing on, I guess the transportation center I find to be one of the most interesting. Is this a way to get? I mean, the idea behind it, and from what I've heard, the businesses are all behind it, right next door. I mean, they've dealt with the construction,
Yep.
and it seems that this will bring in a lot more foot traffic.
Yeah, there's a lot of support from the business community. They had spoken before council in the past supporting the project. There's a significant amount of tour buses running the corridor from New York City to Niagara Falls. Oftentimes they stop at the Glass Museum, the Corning Museum of Glass. So on the return trip, we would like them to stop downtown, have lunch, and maybe shop for an hour before they head back on the road. So it's kind of a natural stopping point in that corridor between the city and Niagara Falls.
Well, it's definitely something that's interesting. It looks really good for business. The only thing, some of the city council members, and we have about a minute here, but city council members were a little upset. It seems to be a discrepancy in what was proposed, some of the spending as opposed to.
Yeah,
but I didn't think you had a problem with. I think you were.
Yeah, the project, you know, all projects change in time, over time. You know, different factors intervene, monies that are available, you know, come and go, costs change, costs escalate depending on labor prices, material prices. So there has been some normal changes, but nothing too far out of the norm to show that it's a different project than when it originated. It's substantially the same project.
And it's going to bring in more money.
Yeah, it is an economic benefit.
Well, anything to help this area. I like this area a lot. That's why I decided I'm going to stay a little bit longer and hang out with you two. And hang out with us after the break. We'll be right back.
Twin Tiers Sunday will return in a moment.
All right, welcome back with my guests, John Burin and Mark Ryckman, city managers of Corning and Elmira. Well, Elmira and Corning, I'll point in the right direction here, guys. We talked a little bit about projects. We talked a little bit about other things that are changing your cities that are you both are attacking. Something else that's people, I think, feel really need to know about are the pension costs rising. I'll just throw out the stat because you said it right before during break, was $48,000 11 years ago for your 131 employees. You have 103 employees now, and now the cost is at $1.2 million.
Correct.
How does it get to that? How does it become that bad?
They're mandated costs by the state of New York. These are not optional costs. The controller of the state of New York sets the pension rates, and because the stock market's been down for the last several years, the controller has been making up the difference by raising rates, which we have to pass on through property taxes. So this has become a significant burden for us. As you mentioned, $48,000 11 years ago for 131 employees, projected at $1.2 million in the upcoming year for 103 employees. So it's a staggering increase. These are monies that are diverted from road repairs and other services that we could be providing the citizenry that have to go to pay the pension bill. So for a number of years, the New York Conference of Mayors and Municipal Officials has talked about moderating these rates, giving us some type of flat rate so that you know, we're not paying too low of a rate in good times. You know, 48,000 is probably too low of a rate for 131 employees. But in the tough times like now, don't sting us with a $1.2 million bill for 103 employees. So that's kind of been something that NYCOM's advocated for a number of years, and the governor this year has listened to that. He has come out with a pension proposal to allow us to lock in rates a little lower than they are now over a 25-year period. I'm still doing some analysis for the city to see if this is a good deal for us. But overall, this is a big step in the right direction to try to give us some pension rate relief that we definitely need.
Yeah.
And so the real issue is, you know, going forward, it brings rates down a little bit, but as the stock market recovers, we will be locked into those rates in good economic times. So we need to do a little more analysis on the out years to see if this is something that we want to opt into, but we're very pleased that the governor has listened to NYCOM's concerns and has proposed this, and it's got a lot of promise to it.
John, would you happen to agree with Mark in terms of if you like it or not, the governor's proposal?
Well, Mark did a very good job of explaining that. In the city of Elmira, going back 4 years, our pension went from $2 million 4 years ago to $4 million today. It's a $2 million increase. And in a city, in an urban environment, you don't have a lot of opportunity to increase your tax base. And so those costs are being passed on to the taxpayers in the form of increased rates and so on. And it's very difficult to continue to provide the same services because of the increased pension costs. And the real kicker is, and I don't know what tier tier 3?
I'm tier 4.
Tier 4?
Yeah.
Tier 4, but neither Mark nor I contribute to our pension, okay? Which is just ludicrous.
Right.
But, the politicians, they did a very nice thing, and they said after 10 years, you no longer have to contribute. Well, we should be contributing, and that in and of itself would help the issue. But I do agree there has to be some type of stabilization. As Mark said, I haven't done enough looking at the numbers yet to see how big a benefit it might be, or if it is a benefit at all. But the one thing I do know, by stabilizing the rates, whatever they might be, it sure helps in the budget process, because what we have now are just big hits, big hits.
And you went over a little bit about your budget in a city council meeting, and it was very, you said, this is our numbers now, but it could change. I mean, you have to deal with changing numbers at all times, every year. And schools are going through the same thing. Elmira City School District, we all know, is, and especially in Corning and Painted Post. So, is there something else that you would suggest? I mean, is the tax cap hurting you too, given the 2% tax cap? As I throw the loaded question out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying you guys can't increase property taxes,
Well,
so I mean, it's
The problem with the tax cap is that the tax cap doesn't address cost drivers.
Right.
So our biggest cost drivers are pension costs, health insurance, wage increases, some of these mandated in binding arbitration. But what the legislature did was they imposed a cap. It's essentially an artificial cap because they never addressed the cost drivers. So, a tax cap, I've talked to my counsel that a tax cap is really only effective if it's coupled with real mandate relief. And so we haven't seen real mandate relief yet. The governor is beginning down that road in terms of this pension proposal, but we need more of that if we're going to make a substantial difference and be able to control property taxes.
John, I love the loaded question. What about you? Is there
Well-
something specific?
Well, if everything stayed status quo, you have a tax cap with no type of mandate relief, it will affect services. You cannot continue to provide those services with those two opposing forces.
Right.
And so it will. And I said this a couple weeks ago, I think it was at a council meeting. If we were to get another increase in our pension, like we did last year was, I think, a $700,000 increase, another one, it will impact services. There's no choice. Unless council decides to pass the local law to go above the tax cap and continue to provide the services. But, you also get to a point where the property taxes are no longer affordable for the services that you're providing. So it's a tough situation.
I mean, you guys deal with it. It seems like every year now we're dealing with something similar.
Well, I'll tell you how rough it is. I used to have dark hair, and he used to have hair.
Yeah, exactly.
And it shows how young I am. In that case. Well, I guess let's finish up here. If you guys want to talk about, is there something else that's maybe that your citizens or the viewers need to know that about your cities that things are going to get better? I mean, in terms of, it sounds like the projects are
I
going
think,
well.
we've got a number of projects underway. Just because there's difficult economic times doesn't mean that we stand still. We continue our financial planning and our community and economic development planning work. Over time, those things do pay dividends. We had a very strong audit a couple of months ago from our auditors. Our financial standing is sound. And we will continue to manage the best we can in these difficult circumstances. But again, we as John mentioned, we can't keep providing these level of services without some mandate relief, and that's really where we need the governor and the legislature to focus their attention.
John, about a minute here.
Yeah, one project in the city that I failed to mention earlier, on the south side of Elmira, it's 300+ acre area is being studied. It's a very
Brownfield.
mixed-use area, industrial, residential, brownfield. You have the whole thing there. It's being studied and do a complete housing stack inventory. The consultant will give us land use recommendations and so on. So that it should make a difference in that area. This is the second phase of that project. This is a 250,000 plus or minus phase, and we'll be moving on from there. So you should see changes over on the south side in the near future.
Well, I'm sure everybody would love to see some changes in both your cities.
Yep.
Although you are doing an incredible job, guys, thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching.